Our next speaker is Dr. Andres Tijerina, and his topic is the Alamo Ownership and History, ? And this session is sponsored by the Texas State Historical Association. Dr. Tijerina received his PhD from University of Texas at Austin and is now professor of history at Austin Community College. Dr. Tijerina has received state and national book prizes for his books Tejanos and Texas and his other major book, Tejano Empire. However, his most widely read work is the publication of his Vietnam War combat memoirs as an Air Force pilot in the Time Life books series, The Vietnam Experience. A recent recipient of the American Historical Association's Equity Award, he is also a fellow of the Texas State Historical Association, for which he is now editor of the online Handbook of Tejano History. He was the first founder of the first statewide Texas Hispanic Genealogy Conference in 1979 and a board member of the Tejano Monument that's at the Capitol in 2012. He's frequently called upon as a speaker in Texas history, most recently on the History Channel on national TV. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Tijerina.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mark. Once again, I'll say that I am so gratified that the Texas General Land Office is sponsoring this symposium for the state of Texas to try to save Texas history and then to bring diverse viewpoints and perspectives is something that Texas history has not always had. You've already heard about that. And General Land Office has led in the way to bring diverse perspectives. I am very grateful for that. I think it's also important to point out that, as Paul Hutton has told us, in his title, History and Memory. History is what scholars put together by going and bringing documented evidence, facts, and then interpreting them into a story. That's history. Memory, which is his other topic, is the story that an individual in a society puts together by seeing a movie, by seeing a building that has a certain name on it, by seeing a statue, and hearing myths from Grandpa about, yeah, they did this and here's the way they did it. Memory is not taken from historical facts and evidence. It's taken from a public perception of buildings and street names and movies and myths. And we put that together into a narrative. And that is what most of us go by. Most people are like my good friend who said, Andres, did you really write a U.S. history textbook? And I said, yeah, I did. I mean, yeah, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. He said, now why ever in the hell would you want to write a history textbook? I said, why? What's the problem? He says, well, hell, I learned all the history I needed to know in the first grade. And that's memory. Memory, he felt he already knew enough about the Alamo, about Texas and everything else, and there is nothing more than what Grandpa told me. That's memory. And that's really what I'm talking about today. History and memory. You've already had a couple of really fascinating speakers. And I have to tell you that Dr. Winters really downplays himself. He is even laid back, but he is a distinguished historian, and we are very proud to have him directing the Alamo for us. And the same thing with Paul Hutton. You've had some really distinguished historians here. I'm going to talk to you about facts that are at the crux of that question. Who writes the history? And how does that history compare to our public memory? And as Paul Hutton has said, our public memory is something that the world shares. Public memory of the Alamo is something you can go, like he said, you can go to Japan, and they know what the Alamo is. And so I would like to talk to you about the identity of the Alamo, what it is to us. The identity of a Texan. What is a Texan? The identity of Texas. What is Texas? What is that Japanese person that you go up and talk to, or a Japanese tourist who comes here on a Saturday to the Alamo? They already know what the Alamo is before they get here. That's why they came. But what do they know? What is the identity of the Alamo? And what is the narrative that he would tell you if you were to ask that Japanese tourist, first time in the United States, first time in San Antonio, first time to go to the Alamo on a Saturday afternoon, and ask him what happened here? He'll tell you. They have the narrative. What will he tell you? That's what I'm speaking about today. You ask him, what is a Texan? He'll tell you. They've got the identity and they have the narrative. Is it historical or is it strictly myth and memory? And I'm going to talk to you today because internationally famous, the Alamo and its narrative. That story about Davy Crockett, about the line in the sand, that wonderful mythical creation myth of how Texans were born and where they were born, I don't think it should lose its prominence. I'm as proud as anybody else, and I love to hear Willie Nelson talk about our forefathers at the Alamo. But for a city that will be celebrating its 300th anniversary in 2018, and I'm guaranteeing you they're going to make it a big splash. San Antonio knows how to party, and they're going to party. It may be timely now to consider extending that historical context earlier than 1836. Now, that Japanese tourist will tell you about 1836. What about the period before that? It may be time, because 1836 to today is not 300 years. Where does San Antonio get the 300 years in 2018? If you're going to celebrate 300 years, looks like you're going to have to go a little bit before. Do the math. And that's what I'm saying. You want to celebrate 300 years? Maybe you better consider telling the rest of the story. And for a city whose Spanish missions were just recently granted the UNESCO World Heritage status by the United Nations, it tends also to invite enhancement of the narrative. Because that designation was given to the missions. San Antonio didn't get designated as a World Heritage Site because of Fiesta, Texas, or SeaWorld. Or Mi Tierra, the restaurant. It should have been. And that's where I agree with J. Frank Dobie. You know, to hear J. Frank Dobie's words, that brings goosebumps. Now, may not be true, but it brings goosebumps. And I've always said, well, if it didn't happen, it shoulda. That's memory. And if the designation was given to the missions, I'm suggesting that maybe we should enhance the narrative of San Antonio beyond just a battle in 1836, and perhaps we should talk about the missions. And I don't think it's so bad either. I don't think it's memory. And that's what I'd like to bring to you today. I'd like to talk to you about some of the facts. Why is it that the people who came to study to see whether they should give San Antonio that world-class heritage, along with Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, the Taj Mahal, why, when they studied San Antonio, did they say the missions? Why? That's what I'd like to do today. Why is it that we say the 300th anniversary? Why 300? That's my role today. I simply want to give you some facts. I want you then to determine for yourself, what is the story? What is a Texan? What is the identity and what is that narrative? The historical context of this Alamo extends all the way to medieval Spain, where Spanish monarchs developed an 800-year-old system of paramilitary civilization. That means civilians and soldiers. That's what Spain was. To defend against the constant and fierce invasion by Muslims from North Africa, who overran and conquered most of the Spanish Iberian Peninsula. And they called this method of fighting, the Spaniards established this system and called it La Frontera. The Frontera consisted of a front line between them and the enemy, defended by forts, presidios, that were guarding the civilian Spanish cities called municipalities. And they were supported by law. Law said that a municipality must, by law, be defended by high defensive stone walls. And then a buffer zone, an empty no man's land out in front of the Frontera, about 150 miles in front, where nobody could live. But Catholic friars, missionaries, could go out into the despoblado to conduct missionary activities to baptize and Christianize heathens and people who were not Catholic. Also, soldiers conducted regular patrols out in this depopulated zone, the despoblado, the Frontera. And while they were there, they tended cattle, which is where ranching came from. Essential to this Spanish concept of the Frontera was the mobility, the fact that the livestock could be moved. They were mobile. You didn't have a crop of wheat that when the enemy attacked, you lose your wheat crop. You had livestock on the hoof. When the enemy attacks, protein, the beef, is mobile. Mobility. And the civilian population could also evacuate. Mobility was always part of this concept. These are the people then who in 1492 crossed the Atlantic. And this was a frontera that the Spaniards established in New Spain, Mexico. After conquering the Aztecs in Tenochtitlan, present-day Mexico City, in 1521, the Spaniards and their native Mexican allies, the Tlaxcalans, then moved northward from Mexico City in the 1590s, all the way up to the Rio Grande, Saltillo, just south of the Rio Grande, ultimately founding Coahuila and Texas as the northernmost Spanish provinces of New Spain. Thus, the Tejanos, those early Spaniards who came to Texas, who remained in Texas on the northern frontera as settlers at the Alamo, at La Villita here across the street, at San Fernando de Béjar, San Antonio, and the 19th century towns of Texas, they were the continuum of Spanish and Indian, because when the Spaniards came northward, they came with the Indians, the Tlaxcalans, the other Mexican Indians. And that's who found San Antonio. Some Tejanos were the natives from Mexico, the Tlaxcalans, that the Spaniards brought with them. Some of the Tejanos here were the European Spaniards. And a growing number of them were the progeny of the mixture of the Spaniards and the Mexicans as they came northward. These were the mixed blood mestizos. The Tejanos were mixed European and native Mexican blood, half Indian, half Spaniard, who brought their families northward to establish Texas and its communities as Tejanos. Tejano is Texan in Spanish. These are the communities of Tejanos. They were the families. They brought their families, their livelihood, their religion, and their culture into Texas. Following the initial expeditions or entradas were the colonizers who then brought the families that would become the communities of Texas. Captain General Martín de Alarcón, the Knight of the Order of Santiago, was the official founder and the governor of the province of Texas and of San Antonio de Béjar. Along with the General Alarcón came powerful Catholic missionaries. And one particular person is a powerful individual, Fray Antonio de San Buenaventura y Olivares, who moved his foundering mission that had been on the Rio Grande in 1700. He moved the mission from that mission site at Solano on the Rio Grande up to San Antonio's present site and founded the mission Valero on May 1, 1718. Valero, as you know, is the Alamo. Thus, at the very founding of Texas, the very founding of San Antonio, and the very founding of Valero were the natives. Not only the Mexican natives, but the local natives that Fray San Buenaventura had on the Rio Grande. Those are the ones he brought. They are the first residents of the Alamo. They're the first residents of San Antonio. They're the first residents of Texas. Had you ever heard of the jarame, the papaya, the payaya, the payaguan, the papanac, and the venado? They're your first Texans. They're the first residents. They built the missions. They built Valero. They gave sustaining life to Béjar, to San Antonio. And they are today some of the very few Americans who still live on the same soil for more generations than any Spaniard. They still live here longer than any European immigrant, longer than any. They're still on the same soil where their great-great-grandparents were, longer than any Puritan, longer than any Pilgrim, and longer than any other Texan. These are the missions which were granted the UNESCO World Heritage Site. These are the missions, not the city, not the restaurants, not the Riverwalk. These are the missions. And in fact, a small college just south of here at Loop 1604, Northwest Vista College, is right now engaged in a funded project to find all of the descendants of these people because they're still here. Their land records, their family records are being documented, collected right now by a professor of that little college. Texas continued for 100 years as the rugged frontera on the remote northern fringes of New Spain. And as it did, the Tejanos developed their unique blend of races and cultures. Another of the most distinctive elements of this Tejano community was the vaquero and the ranching frontier. This, by the way, is a document that Mark has at the General Land Office. It is the official order to bring those natives from the Rio Grande at Solano and to establish them here at a new mission, the Valero. So Valero was established by those natives. And so were the other missions that are here inside a metropolitan city of the United States. Old missions, Valero, San Jose, Concepcion, Espada, later down on the coast, La Bahia. And in the 1750s, then, hundreds of noble Spanish families were also brought by another count, the Conde de Sierra Gorda, a Spanish count, José de Escandón, a colonizer. These were colonized all along the Rio Grande in the 1750s. And I can tell you, they, of course, are still here. My wife's sitting there with me. Juanita, would you just wave your hand? Juanita is a direct descendant of those Spanish families that are still on the same ranches. We went to visit her family's ranch that had been founded in the 1750s. A lot of people say, well, I'm a third generation Texan. I'm a fourth. 7. They're the ones that gave us the mythic Rancho Grande. El Rancho Grande, that's who gave us the ranching frontier in what Walter Prescott Webb would later call the Texas Cattle Kingdom. These are the ranching families. These are the vaqueros who had established not only the distinctive clothing and the culture, the boots, the hats, the chaps, the cowboy hat, the spurs, but the colorful institutions that make Texas so unique. The cattle brands, the open range, the spirited rodeo or the roundup, and the extensive cattle drives across the prairies. These are the people who gave us the North American ranching frontier. And Montana and Wyoming have the cows that were taken from here by these boys. Webb said that the cowboys would sing a little song, "Get along, little doggie, for you know Wyoming will be your new home." The question you should ask is, what's their old home? If Wyoming was the new home for the cattle, where are they coming from? They're coming from these Tejanos who raised 6 million Texas Longhorns. I've always said, they're not Texas Longhorns, Tejanos raised them. Longhorns don't grow on trees. But I'm proud too. I mean, I like to see them out on the football field. The big old Longhorn cow represents Texas. Another part of this DNA that we celebrate in the Texas Longhorn and the pride that we have in the cattle kingdom is the way that they defended it. To guard this expansive frontier, Tejanos perfected a unique mounted constabulary, the Compañía Volante, the flying squadron. They were initially from Alamo de Parras, down in just across the Rio Grande in Mexico. But they were a light cavalry troop that were first stationed here at Valero in 1803, and yes, that is where the Alamo got its name. Because there were Alamo trees, cottonwood trees, back in where they came from in Alamo de Parras. That's where it got its name, from the trees, but the Alamo got its name from these boys. They came here. They were a unique paramilitary unit that was the model for what the Anglo-Texians would later call the Texas Rangers. Well, just like the Anglo had to learn the boots and the chaps and the spurs and the hat and the cowboys and the Mustangs and the Longhorns and everything else, the lasso from these Tejanos, so did they learn how to fight as Rangers, because that's all these people are. They're the precursors. Troops of the Alamo Compañía Volante were people like Toribio Lozoya, Pedro Gaona, Pedro Herrera. These people would become Tejanos. They would intermarry here in Béjar. They would live right over here at this place where we all celebrate, La Villita, just about a block away from here. That was their homes. Their service was here at the Alamo, but their homes and families were at La Villita. And as a result then, when Mexico and Mexican army with Santa Anna invades them, these are the people that fight Santa Anna. They're the ones that fought. They were born at Concepcion, at San Jose, at Espada. I was at the Tibera County Archives 2 days ago, and I saw, and I have in the 1809 census, one of these guys as a 2-year-old at Espada, Mission Espada. He later then is with Stephen F. Austin and Mirabeau B. Lamar as they take San Antonio from the Mexican army and then move into the Alamo. Julian Diaz was born in one of the missions. His brother, Canuto Diaz, helped at the grass fight, at the siege of Béjar, and other battles. Just as Lozoya was born on the grounds of the Alamo, and in 1836, Bruce, he died in the Battle of Alamo. Identity Texan. What is a Texan? Born in the Alamo, died in the Alamo, fighting. Identity. What is a Texan? Thus, when Mexican independence movement started in 1810, it found fertile soil here in Texas because the Tejanos had always wanted independence. So the father of Mexican independence commissioned a Tejano, Colonel Bernardo Gutierrez de Lara, to, even though Hidalgo was captured and he was executed, de Lara continued the fight. In 1813, de Lara built an army. And just about maybe 13 miles south of San Antonio, a superior Spanish army came to try to quell this independence movement in Texas. And about 1,400 Anglos, Indians, and Tejanos met them right over here south of San Antonio in the Battle of Medina, the biggest battle ever fought on Texas soil. Probably about 3,000 men fighting it out for 45 minutes or so because the Tejanos didn't have cannon. They were completely destroyed. Only a few hundred of them survived the battle, and they escaped back to San Antonio and then ran all the way to Nacogdoches, but the Spanish army pursued them, caught them, beheaded, executed them, and then punished and confiscated the lands of all of the other Tejanos, the Navarro, the Seguin, all the other families of Tejanos here. Their land was confiscated by the Spanish commander Arredondo. But I want you to know that at a speech that I gave a couple of nights ago to a family of Arciniega, one of these heroes, Tejano heroes, a gentleman came up to me, Anthony Delgado, and said, yeah, a couple of my great-great-granduncles were in that army at the Battle of Medina, but instead of escaping with the other guys, they fled toward Mexico and they escaped. But I want you to know that this is history, but as I've always said, when I talk and teach history in San Antonio, the people in my class, to them it's genealogy, because they're still here. Norma Langwell, put that because she's a direct descendant of Miguel Arciniega that I spoke about 2 nights ago here at a banquet. Norma's still here. She's a direct descendant. And we were just 2 blocks away from Arciniega Street. Where's Norma? Norma, where are you? Stand up, Norma. They're still here. (1813), Gutierrez de Lara first declared the independence of Texas as an independent state in the Democratic Republic of Mexico. And then he draws up the first state constitution of any state in all of Mexico. Texas always led the way for democracy, liberty, and independence against Spaniards and then later against Mexico. And Texas was one of the first Mexican states to actually draw up a state legislature, the provincial deputation. After several years in the Revolution, In 1823, here in San Antonio, Texas had its own state legislature, its own governor. That then would become an official state legislature under the Constitution of Mexico, once Mexico got its constitution. And what's very important is that the governor, Agustin Viescas, was a liberal. He lived in Saltillo, just across the Rio Grande, and Texas was joined with Coahuila, the neighboring state, as one Mexican state, Coahuila y Texas. The governor then was in Saltillo. This man was a liberal. He was highly educated. Stephen F. Austin reports that when he went to Saltillo to visit the governor, he said the governor has a home in the city with a vast library of all of the books of the Enlightenment. He has another home on a big, magnificent ranch right out of Saltillo and another big library. I've been to that ranch and I've seen that home. These people were educated and highly steeped in Enlightenment theory. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, John Locke. They had those books, and the books had a brand, literally branded on the leather cover that said, censored by the Crown of Spain. Well, they had their books, and on their books they marked it, don't brand me, I am free. Democracy, they knew democracy. Constitution, they knew Constitution. These are the people. It's Viescas and his liberal. These are the people who said, we need Anglo-American technology, we need Anglo-American capitalism, and we need Anglo-American cotton. And there's no better way to get that cotton than to bring the Anglo-American cotton farmer, the best cotton farmer in the world. Bring those southern cotton farmers to Texas. We will surpass all of the rest of Mexico, and they did. That was their objective. One of your other speakers here today, Andrew Torgett, an award-winning author. I'm very proud of this man. He's come and he's just really brought us new ideas and new facts for Texas history. This is where Texas history comes from. Torgett said in his book, it was the Mexicans of Texas, not the Anglo-Americans, who would become the essential power brokers in forging political alliances that brought the global cotton market into northern Mexico. The Tejanos brought the Anglo-American into Texas. Under Viescas, they gave the Anglo-Americans 4,000 acres free that could never be taken from you. That's called a homestead. They made English a legal language in Texas. They gave them trial by jury. They divided Texas into 3 districts or departments, giving each one of them their official legislatures. The Anglos had their own legislators to the Saltillo Congress. Viescas is the one who repealed the Santa Anna's law that tried in 1830 to prohibit further Anglo-American immigration. These are the people who also, Viescas is the one who declared Texas independence long before Davie and Travis. Viescas declared to the Tejanos as Santa Anna was marching, you must arise now in arms or forever sleep. Santa Anna wasn't after Davie. He came after Governor Viescas, the one who led all these, the capitalists, the cotton farmers, the Anglo-Americans. Santa Anna was after Viescas, and he's the first one he captured. And all of the Tejanos, Santa Anna wanted to capture them. And he did, and he punished them. The Tejanos are the ones who drew the line between Santa Anna's tyranny and Texas liberty. And they did it long before the Alamo. That's what Santa Anna was coming to Texas for. He didn't know about Davie until he got here. He knew about Viescas and the Tejanos. That's what he wanted. Their agenda was to fight for freedom, and they did. Juan Seguin, Canuto Diaz, Julian Diaz, Jose Toribio Lozoya. These are the people who fought in the Alamo, and it was 7 of them who stayed and died in the Alamo. And it's called a handful, but it's a big handful. There's about 300 of them that fought in the Revolution, because the Revolution was much more than the Alamo. They were at San Jacinto. They were the cavalry at San Jacinto. They were here at the Alamo. They were in the Siege of Béjar. They were in the grass fight. They were in all the... In fact, Seguin is the only Texan who really fought in all of them. Again, what is a Texan? Is it a person who comes from Tennessee and he's here for 2 weeks? Or is it somebody whose family founded Texas and started the revolution and ended the revolution and was in every battle? These are the terms that we're looking for. These are the people then. We've got the official documents who got those pensions, and you were talking earlier about the state pensions that you got for fighting in the Alamo. This is what they look like. This is what a pension looks like. And that is Juan Seguin. And you can see at the bottom Juan Seguin's signature. He's saying, yeah, Eugenio Tejada, yeah, he was here. He fought at the Siege of Béjar. Canuto Diaz, yeah, he's the boy that was born over here on one of the missions. So I want to point out to you that if you're born in a mission, you're a Native American Indian, and you're fighting for Texas liberty. Now, I don't know what Hollywood makes of that, but this is a Texan. These are the people then who gave the land grants. The Tejanos are the ones that established the concept of free land. Thomas Jefferson would sell it to you. These people said, no, you want the Anglos to come to Texas? Give them the land and make it where they can never have it taken away from them by a United States Congress for taxes. Give them land for fighting. That's the donation land grants. Tejanos got the donation land grants. Give them homestead protection and make the land include the minerals under the land and out into the Gulf of Mexico. You want to know why Texas owns the oil wells out in the Gulf of Mexico? Because the Tejanos said Texas extends 12 miles out into the Gulf of Mexico, not 3. 3 leagues, that's 12 miles. These are the people who gave us our water rights, our water laws that we have in Texas. These are the people then who gave us land for education, who gave us the concept that a woman owns everything that the man does in a marriage. Your community property rights that you enjoy today came from San Antonio, written by a Tejano in Spanish. Sam Houston took it to the Congress in Washington. They said, that's a good law. Adopting a child into a family. So many of our laws and legal traditions are from this community. Now, this is not a band of people who do not know democracy. This is a stable community. It is a beautiful community. Look at the dresses these girls are wearing. Does that look like Frontier? This was a stable community. Texas had a constitution, had a democracy. These people knew what they were fighting for. And this, by the way, this is a fandango, is the community that gave us the vocabulary that we have in Texas. Lasso, corral, rancho, barbecue. They're the people who gave us the laws that everything we brag about in Texas, Longhorns, Mustangs, Mavericks, Pintos. You get in a car called a Pinto and you drive down a street called Guadalupe. You cross a river called Brazos. You go to a place called a rancho next to a corral. And you eat barbacoa. This is your Tejano identity and your Tejano heritage. It's not that hard to see. Finally, I want you to know that we did put up a monument. And I will conclude by saying that today, and I'm proud to say that I was on the board of directors of that for 12 years and $2.6 million. We collected the money, we got the legislature to authorize it, and we put up the Tejano Monument. The story I'm telling you today is in those 5 bronze plaques in front of the monument. It is the story of the Tejanos. And so we must, like I started my talk today, we must keep that beautiful international identity and image of the Alamo in Texas, that beautiful narrative of Texas. It must remain prominent. But we can enhance the identity. We can extend the time period, and the narrative to include those people who were here from the very first day. People who may have different sounding names. But again, if you're going to talk about Texan, and if you're going to talk about the story of liberty, then I invite you to consider enhancing that story and extending the history of Texas. Thank you very much.
Andres, your speech rocked so well, you almost knocked the sign down. We do have time for a couple questions. If anybody, please wait for a microphone. If you do have a question, and Professor will come back up here. But your questions are between you and your break, so please be short.
Oh, I got you right here.
It's like I told my men when they said, pilot, are we going to really fly into that valley? And I said, boys, there's some Marines down there that need some ammunition real bad. Yeah, but we got to go home. And I said, okay, we're going home. But the way home and the fastest way home is through the valley, guys. So keep your questions short, because the fastest way to lunch is...
So did the...
Who's got a question? I can't... Let's see. Okay, yeah, James.
Did the man you were mentioning in Saltillo, did he realize that when they were bringing Southern Anglo farmers in, that they would also get the slavery part?
Yes. And he was as conflicted about that as George Washington. He was as conflicted about that as Thomas Jefferson. He was as conflicted about that as Miguel Arciniega, who wrote the law when the Mexican government says, you Tejanos cannot bring slaves. We've already passed and prohibited slavery. You may not bring slaves into Mexico. The Tejano in the legislature wrote a law that said, we're not. These are indentured servants for life. Did they know? Yes, they knew. Did Thomas Jefferson know? They knew. They were conflicted. Did Texas become the most prosperous cotton-producing state in all of Mexico within 10 years? Yes. And that's what we have to balance. Another question.
Dr. Tijerina,
Oh, excuse me. I've always asked, if he was the first governor that built Texas, that gave us all of these laws that we enjoy today, that the veterans enjoy today, why at the state capitol, in the rotunda of the dome, where all the pictures of the Texas governors are, why isn't Viescas there? And I asked a guy in the cap, I says, why don't we have Governor Viescas there? He says, well, it's because, and the other guy says, because he was governor of another country, Mexico. And I said, really? What the hell do you consider the Confederate States of America? What do you consider the Republic of Texas? Aren't those other countries? He says, yeah, I know, but these guys fought for liberty. Okay, no argument. Question.
As a public high school teacher, would you please consult with the Texas School Board on the new Mexican-American history book? Thank you.
20 years ago, an audience would not have applauded at that. That's the difference you're making. Tell the commissioner. That's the difference the general land office. You are opening the horizons of Texans, and I am so proud to hear that. When you hear about that controversy, you hear that a bogus textbook was put up, and you hear that it was harshly criticized for being inaccurate and having biased interpretations by scholars. I agree with you that I should do something. I brought together James Crisp, Frank de la Teja, Emilio Zamora, and I said, we're going to write official critiques and scholarly reviews of this textbook, and I'm going to put that together, and I'm going to submit that to the Board of Education. Ma'am, that's what we did. We are the scholars who are telling them, You can have a textbook, but this one ain't it. So. One more question?
We got one more question over here.
Dr.
By the way,
Tijerina,
I don't get in front of the cameras over there. I write the stuff and then I say, here, use it. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Tijerina, being very proud of Texan heritage and, of course, the San Antonio, I know the last time I attended the cathedral, I think, and that's what I was wondering if you could help me with, it was the oldest parish church in America, or the oldest continuous, because it's so beautiful and all the things the Canary Islanders did, some of the original, San Antonio Bay are. And it was very awesome. I had gone to the mariachi mass, and it was so beautiful. It just almost makes you cry because you are absorbing that culture, and I'm very proud of it.
Yes, it almost makes you cry. I don't know that anytime I've said something like that, some local guy comes up and says, no, it's actually the so-and-so. So I will say it's got to be one of the first. And, California's got all the publicity about missions, right? And half their cities are named Santa this or Santa that. Even Los Angeles, they had so many saints, they just called it the Angels. But for all the hype and everything, Valero's the same building. Nobody rebuilt that. Now they added but it's the building. The Indians who built that, the Native Americans who built that, that's their chiseling. That's their stonework. All of these missions are the original buildings. California doesn't have that. You want the most perfect building in Presidio. Everything I've been talking about is in Goliad. I'll put La Bahia up to any building in North America. So I don't know about that one cathedral, but San Antonio in Texas, this is why I say, we need to be proud of the Battle of 1836, but we also need to enhance that and extend it so that we can be proud of the missions as well. And we can tell the people, yeah, you got your Taj Mahal, we've got the missions, and they're the real thing. I'm sorry, I got emotional. Thank you.